remember the first time I saw my amputated leg, except there were two first times. You'll see what I mean. When I woke up from amputation, I was in a dark recovery room, lying on a hospital bed as the anesthesia wore off. Before I even opened my eyes, I remember hearing a nurse's voice.
Are you all right? How do you feel?
I replied,
Not bad for 1 foot in the grave.
Oh, you're fine.
I'm still proud that my first words as an amputee were worth remembering. Having made the first of many lame puns, I figured I might as well wake up.
Puns are therapeutic, and you can roll your eyes at me all you want. I can't see you.
Every minute, I was more awake and less loopy. I sat up, looked at my leg for the first time, and you know what? I felt all right. I was at peace with everything, which was comforting because it reassured me that I'd made the right choice. Now I know that it's not this positive for all amputees. Even if amputation was the right choice, you might feel anything from anger to grief to denial. I'm just sharing my experience, which happened to be a good one. The big caveat to all this is that I had an elective amputation, meaning that my amputation was scheduled.
I have to go. My alarm didn't go off, so I'm late. Can't be late for my own amputation. Yikes. I might cut off someone else's foot.
Will
Just
they
kidding.
cut off mine?
No, I love the pumpkin.
I don't anymore.
I knew ahead of time that my leg was going to be amputated, so I had a bit of time to go through the grieving process and prepare myself mentally and emotionally. And frankly, after years of fighting a hopeless battle trying to save my leg, amputation felt more like an act of hope, of giving me a chance to get my life back, rather than a tragedy that I just lost my life, if that makes sense. Contrast that with if someone is in a car accident and they abruptly lose their leg, and they wake up in the hospital to find their limb is missing, but they weren't expecting it. I suspect their first sight of their amputated limb would be very different from what mine was like. Not to mention, if it was from an accident, your body might be in a lot more pain from other injuries as well. The context amputation takes place in makes a big difference. I think it's hard to predict how you'll react. Not only do emotions run high during something so life-changing, but being drugged up and loopy from anesthesia can put you in a different state of mind, as can pain. I was delighted that my nerve block was working when I woke up, but that isn't a guarantee. Being in pain when you first see your amputated limb could definitely taint the experience.
I have had some phantom sensations where it feels like I can feel my foot, but not painful sensations, no phantom pain. So aside from a little bit of a sore throat from the anesthesia and my hand has a needle in it, other than that, I'd say zero pain, which is amazing. Haven't been in zero pain for years.
Looking at my freshly amputated leg was strangely similar to looking at a newborn baby. My limb felt like a stranger, and yet it was definitely mine. Another similarity was that leading up to this day, I'd been anticipating this moment without being able to truly visualize it ahead of time. And now here it was. And just like with a new baby, I ended up naming my new arrival, but I'll get to that in a minute. I spent a few minutes just getting familiar with the new me, looking at my leg from different angles and trying to wrap my brain around such a drastic change. The weirdest thing was that my leg felt like it was floating. You know that feeling after lifting weights when you set them down? Sometimes it feels like your arms are floating. My leg had spent its entire existence hollowing around the weight of a foot. Now that it was gone, it felt incredibly light, like it would just float away. Gravity was fully reinstated by the end of the day, but for a while I was heartily amused by my leg that just kept drifting upward of its own accord. I guess you just can't keep me down. So that's the first time I saw my amputated leg. Or was it? When I woke up, I saw my leg all bundled up, like a baby. Yes, I'm still running with this analogy, so long as I don't have to do any actual running. With all those bandages in the way, I hadn't seen the actual leg yet. Seeing the stitched up skin isn't the same as seeing clean, tidy bandages. That's why I said that I saw my amputated leg for the first time twice. When the bandages were removed, I saw my leg fully for the first time. I had my phone out and recording, so I can show you the actual footage, or lack thereof. Don't worry if you're squeamish, I'll warn you before I show the stitches. 2.5 days after my amputation, my surgeon came in and removed the surgical dressing so he could check the incision. I was very curious to get a look at my new leg, and while I tried to sound nonchalant,
I'm stumped.
Yep.
it was actually quite painful when the bandages were removed. You see my hand tapping? That's because as a martial artist, I'm programmed to tap out when something gets more painful than I want to put up with, except doctors never seem to respect the tap. My anticipation grew each time the bandage circled around my leg. I didn't know how I'd feel seeing the stitches. I was surprised by how little blood there was.
That's not much blood. I expected there to be a little bit.
Well, like I said, you didn't bleed much during surgery,
I
so.
tried.
Having had several foot surgeries, I expected there to be more blood, but my surgeon says I only lost a couple tablespoons, which is pretty impressive if you ask me. After the ACE wrap and the gauze were removed, all that was left was a thin strip over the stitches. My guess is that it helps prevent the stitches from getting caught on the gauze and pulling at them. If you're squeamish, now is the time to look away. This last thin layer was pulled off, and I looked at my amputated leg fully for the first time. It wasn't a pretty sight.
I'm ready for Halloween.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except the sutures won't last that long.
Oh
They'll
man.
grow in. And
I'll be a pirate.
Swollen, stitched up, and oozing blood, it looked more like a Halloween prop than my leg. It was such a strange experience. It felt surreal. Touching it made it feel more real, but it still took time to really get used to it. It was just so different. One of the good things about seeing my leg was that I noticed that one of my muscles was rigid and more prominent than usual. Having had muscle spasms in the past, I realized what it was and pointed it out to my surgeon. He gave me some muscle relaxers and that helped with the pain. After a good long look, it was time to put on a new dressing. This video isn't meant to be medical advice, but I would suggest talking with your doctor. I mean, he's in the business of giving out medical advice, so maybe ask him about making sure your pain meds and pain management are all worked out before unwrapping the leg, because it'd be pretty awful if your pain meds were running out just when he comes in to unwrap the leg. The stitches are covered up, so squeamish viewers, you should be safe to look now.
So is this just like a padding layer, or what is it?
Sorry, I'm just.
It's called a Mepilex border.
Okay.
Get it folded there.
Looks like
It's
bubble wrap.
a silicone dressing,
Oh, okay.
and it's gray because it's got silver on it to help with.
So don't throw that away.
So
Just kidding.
yeah, it's like a $10 dressing.
Well, there you have it.
So, but
What do I have to do to get platinum?
I don't know if they've done any studies on platinum, but the foam helps pull any drainage away from it.
Oh, okay.
So,
This whole process of unwrapping and rewrapping my leg was very painful. My prosthetist says that the amount of pain during the dressing varies a lot patient to patient.
Look at that. See, I do sewing too, but I don't do it on people. That's a little harder to pull through skin, right?
That's why we use the needle drivers.
Yeah, the needle driver. I need one of those.
Yeah.
How's your pain doing? This is likely to be the worst part of it all.
I'm tough.
You're tough? Okay.
Yeah.
Some new amputees don't seem to hurt at all, whereas others are in excruciating pain.
You just want to tuck that right under the edge there, just like that.
You deal with that very well.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've been doing martial arts since I was a teenager, and in martial arts where you do joint locks, you tap out.
Yeah.
And so I have a reflex now where, like, I tap when things are like, oh, that's a bit much. But I'm not telling you to stop. You know, it's just a reflex. And my physical therapist makes fun of me. My husband says if I get in a car wreck and die in the coffin, you'll just hear this little tap, 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 tap. Like,
I was in more pain than I wanted to let on. Joking was a coping mechanism. I tried to act like bandaging my leg was no big deal, but beneath the surface, it was. A friend happened to stop by right before all this happened, and I was grateful to have someone with me during the process, even though I tried not to let on just how ouchy it was. But for the record, there's nothing wrong with letting people know when you're struggling. I'm just saying that one way I personally stay calm is by acting calm, even when it feels counterintuitive. Kind of like how you can sometimes trick yourself into feeling cheerful by simply going through the motions. We all cope differently. I'm not saying to suppress emotions, I'm just telling you how I personally got through a tough moment. In the middle of all this, someone asked me how my leg was doing. I replied,
Stumpy is grumpy.
I kind of surprised myself. Though I've heard of other amputees naming not just their prosthetic legs, but also their amputated limbs, I had zero intention of joining in the tradition.
What did the patient say to the doctor when he asked what kind of pain meds she wanted? I don't know. I'm stumped.
I'm not sure if it's that the rhyme Stumpy is grumpy amused me or that my kids picked up on the nickname when they heard it. But the name stuck. My residual limb has been stumpy ever since. I'm still not sure why I'm a she, but my amputated leg is a he, but that's just how it turned out. I never call it nubbin or anything cutesy like that. I'm not really a cutesy person. His name is Stumpy, and that's that.
Pain level is significant, largely just because we messed with changing out the dressing from the surgical dressing to have this hard brace that the prosthetist brought. And that was pretty painful, so brace yourself. It really hurt, but it's necessary for healing, so kind of just grit your teeth and go with it. Maybe take some pain meds before the prosthetist comes. I don't know if all prosthetists meet you in the hospital to put on a brace like this, or if it's just mine, but it sounds like a really good device to have on your leg to protect it and to prevent contractures.
As thematic as it is having all those Frankenstein stitches, it isn't Halloween and stitches are not comfy. If you want to know what it was like getting those stitches out, I've got a video that'll come out next week with the details. And if you're facing amputation, hang in there. Losing a limb is a bizarre experience, but with time you adapt and life does go on, even if it goes on differently than before. Take it one day at a time and keep on keeping on. I'm Stephanina, and thank you for joining me on my amputee adventures.